collecting? Well, all of you can collect because I'll have no plants left. Okay, they're designated collectors? Okay. Okay, let's start with this guy right here.
Yucca.
Yeah, thank you. Yucca filamentosa, which is number 1246. 1246. And if you read Michael Durr's comments on this, I love this. Too many yuccas causes one to yuck. And it's the same thoughts that I do. And if you read my description on this, I tell a story where, in my ignorance, because I actually like the plant when it's in flower. I actually like the plant, but it looks like it belongs in the desert, right? Not in this northern temperate landscape. And I planted one at home at the end of the driveway. And then I decided that I didn't want it anymore, so I went to dig it out.
Yeah, good luck with
and it popped up in the driveway, in the gravel. So then I used to come in and I parked the truck wheel right on top of it, squash it. Then it popped up in the lawn. So then I'd get the lawnmower out and I would chop it off as it popped up, and it eventually failed after that, but it took several years of driving and mulching it, because they have a very big storage root, and then you can actually eat as well, high in starch, as most roots are. And that is a characteristic of drought-tolerant plants, right? They can store these reserves. So you go to when you look at desert plants, you look at cactus. Cactus are the obvious ones because they've got this big above-ground storage system, but the yucca has it underground. There's also something called monocarpic. And monocarpic means it flowers once and dies. So why do we have still yuccas here, and why do we have yuccas at the front? It's because they send out new offshoots. So the rosette that produces the flower spike dies, but it sends out offsets. This happens with a very, very common plant that you'll see in the landscape all the time, called the house leek or sempervivans, or otherwise known as hens and chicks. You know, those little succulent things? Those are monocarpic. We've got about, I don't know, hundreds of flats of them out at Cuddy's, right? They're monocarpic, so they send up a flower spike, and that central rosette then dies, but they put out new rosettes. So we're looking at a xeriscape plant. That's another new word for you probably today. It's an old, okay, good. Sue? No? Who?
kind of everyone. You're at Cuddy's when we had to identify the different gardens.
Okay. Okay, so xeriscape. So you know what xeriscape means. Typical xeriscape plant. And my problem with using this plant in a North American landscape or in a North American landscape here, maybe you could use it in Lethbridge, which is kind of desert, but you could, it's odd. It's very hard to work it in from a design perspective in the landscape. Nonetheless, when it does flower, it'll produce a flower spike up to here. It's very, very attractive. They have large ivory bell-shaped flowers that hang down that spike, so you'll need to look at the image for that. It's pollinated by a moth, the Pernuba moth, which means it's got a big nose. I guess it needs a big nose to get up inside those bells. And, yeah, long-lived, tough. I've never seen a disease problem or pest problem with it. The worst thing that can happen is wet soils and you'll get some rot, and that's a way of killing it. But other than that, it's a really, really tough plant. Not much to look at when it's not in flower. One of the identification characteristics, who's cutting leaf?
There you go.
Thank you.
Teamwork. Yep.
Thank you. If you look at these twines, or these strands, along the edges of the leaves, these long, does?
When does it, you said it's monocarpic, right?
Yeah.
When does it grow?
Usually mid to late summer.
But I mean, how many years does it have to grow?
Oh, so this one probably won't flower here for a while because it's too shaded. It's getting shaded by the heptacodium. But the ones out front have flowered, and we'll see those in a second. So after a few years, once it's established, it'll flower, but it's got to be in full sun. It doesn't like shade. So it's got these these strains, and one of the old uses of the plant was it was used as a textile. So you would actually take these leaves, put them in a pit of water where the cellulose would get fermented and kind of fall away, and you'd pummel it a little bit, and you'd get all these strands here, and then you could weave them. So, you know, remember in that airplane crash when you were brewing sumac tea and adding birch bark sugar, or birch sugar and maple syrup to your tea? You can also then sew your clothes back together. Yeah, yeah. There you go. And you probably could use these as needles too, because they're very, very sharp on the end. Any questions? No?